The courtroom is a place of order, evidence, and legal precision, an arena where lives and freedoms hang in the balance. Yet, in rare and often chaotic moments, defendants accused of some of the most serious crimes imaginable choose to forego professional legal representation and take control of their own defense. These moments are often defined not by sound legal strategy, but by disruption, delusion, and desperation. In this compilation, we explore 5 of the most shocking and surreal cases in recent U.S. legal history, where defendants acted as their own attorneys. These self-represented trials featured emotional outbursts, courtroom antics, wild conspiracy theories, and moments so uncomfortable that judges were forced to remove defendants from their own proceedings. From mass murder to brutal assaults, the gravity of the crime stood in stark contrast to the often bizarre courtroom behavior. Each of these cases demonstrates, in vivid detail, the risks of self-representation and why the legal adage rings true. A man who represents himself has a fool for a client. These stories are not just about the crimes committed, but the sheer unpredictability of what happens when the accused takes center stage armed, not with legal skill, but with their own distorted sense of justice.
Darrell Brooks Jr.
In one of the most infamous courtroom spectacles in recent memory, Darrell Brooks Jr. chose to represent himself during his 2022 trial for driving an SUV through a Christmas parade in Waukesha, Wisconsin. The attack, which took place on November 21, 2021, killed 6 people and injured dozens more. Despite the gravity of the charges, 6 counts of first-degree intentional homicide, among others, Brooks made the bold decision to go pro se. What followed was courtroom chaos. Brooks interrupted the judge constantly, refused to be called by his legal name, and made outlandish legal claims typical of sovereign citizen ideology. He objected to nearly everything, questioned the court's jurisdiction, and was eventually removed to a separate courtroom multiple times due to his behavior. He even constructed a fort out of boxes and took off his shirt to draw attention. Throughout the trial, Brooks attempted to use unconventional arguments, including claiming that his vehicle had a recall issue and that he lost control unintentionally. He also tried to claim jury nullification, which is not allowed under court rules. None of his defenses held up against the overwhelming video evidence, eyewitness testimony, and expert analysis that showed his actions were deliberate. The jury deliberated for only 3 hours before convicting him on all 76 charges. Brooks received 6 consecutive life sentences, plus an additional 700 years in prison. His trial became a textbook example of why self-representation in such serious cases is almost always a disastrous choice.
Ronnie O'Neal III.
In a horrifying case that gripped the nation, Ronnie O'Neal III represented himself during his 2021 trial for the brutal murders of his girlfriend and their special needs daughter, and the attempted murder of his young son. The crime, which occurred in Riverview, Florida in 2018, was marked by extreme violence, including stabbing, shooting, and arson. O'Neal began his trial with a shouted opening statement filled with wild claims, alleging government corruption and tampering with evidence. He accused law enforcement of editing 911 call records and insisted that his son's testimony was unreliable. His delivery was theatrical and aggressive, resembling a performance more than a legal defense. Perhaps the most disturbing moment came when O'Neal cross-examined his own surviving Santha child he was accused of stabbing and burning. The boy bravely testified, identifying his father as the attacker. O'Neal even thanked the detective who later adopted his son, before turning around and suggesting that this adoption compromised the boy's credibility. In his closing statement, O'Neal confessed to killing his girlfriend, but argued it wasn't as brutal as claimed. He said he was not sorry for things he didn't do. The jury convicted him on all counts, and the judge handed down 3 life sentences plus 90 years, calling it the worst case she had ever seen.
Bradley Yohn.
Bradley Yohn's case in Quincy, Illinois, was disturbing not only for the crimes involved, but for his bizarre and incoherent courtroom behavior. Accused of a heinous home invasion, sexual assault, kidnapping, and carjacking in 2021 that led to the death of 77-year-old Tina Loneman Schmidt, Yohn chose to represent himself at trial in 2023. From the beginning, Yohn's self-representation was marked by rambling monologues and strange anecdotes. He opened with a tale about Scooby-Doo and his brother's remote control habits, attempting to use the story as an analogy for false accusations. Throughout the trial, he focused on irrelevant topics and tried to garner sympathy, despite the brutal nature of the allegations against him. He repeatedly misused legal terminology, and failed to understand basic courtroom procedures. He tried to impeach witnesses with inadmissible phone records and became combative when corrected. His courtroom demeanor only worsened his image before the jury. At one point, he even argued that his relatives' disruption in the courtroom should not disqualify them from attending, despite clear court rules. Ultimately, Yohn was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to 130 years in prison, with a minimum of 110 to be served. The judge called him the most reprehensible person to ever appear in his courtroom, sealing the fate of a man who thought he could out-talk the law.
Trevor Summers.
Trevor Summers shocked the courtroom when he decided mid-trial in 2022 to fire his defense attorney and cross-examine his own ex-wife, the woman he was accused of kidnapping, sexually assaulting, and attempting to murder. The crimes occurred in 2017 when he broke into her home in violation of a restraining order, tied her up, and held her captive. Initially represented by legal counsel, Summers claimed he could better conduct the cross-examination himself. What followed was an uncomfortable and traumatic exchange, with his ex-wife forced to answer his questions about her own assault. She bravely testified, detailing how he tied her hands, slit her wrists, and forced her into a car with the intent to kill her in a murder-suicide. Summers tried to cast doubt on her credibility, arguing that she couldn't know his intentions or what he was thinking. His cross-examination was harsh and ineffective. In his closing argument, he focused on reasonable doubt, but failed to dismantle the clear evidence or the compelling testimony from the victim. The jury deliberated for less than 5 hours and returned a guilty verdict on all charges, including attempted murder and sexual assault. Summers was sentenced to 3 life sentences plus 224 additional years, a fitting punishment for one of the most disturbing cases of self-representation.
Stephen Lorenzo.
Unlike the other cases, Stephen Lorenzo actually wanted the death penalty. Accused of 2 brutal murders in 2003 and later charged with drugging and sexually abusing 9 men, Lorenzo delayed his trial for years before finally pleading guilty in 2022. His case took place in Florida and involved the gruesome killings of Jason Galehouse and Michael Wachholtz. Lorenzo represented himself during the sentencing phase and gave chilling, matter-of-fact descriptions of the crimes. He explained that he and his accomplice had decided their victim couldn't be allowed to live, so they suffocated him and dismembered his body. Lorenzo made no attempt to defend himself or reduce his sentence. In fact, he welcomed the death penalty. He even explained to the court that he preferred death row conditions over his current federal prison arrangement. He described it as easy time, with more privacy and comforts like a personal TV and computer. Lorenzo told the court he viewed death as a way to get a new body and return in another life. Despite his wish to die, the judge made it clear that sentencing was about justicing, his preference. He was sentenced to death, bringing closure to a case that had haunted families and investigators for nearly 2 decades.